Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of Blind Eye Live. I am your host, Blind Eye himself, Hunter King, owner and proprietor of Blind Eye Media, a small social media company on the YouTubes. Here for our April 1st edition 2021 of Blind Eye Live. Happy April Fool's Day if people even do anything for April Fools anymore. My title for my show is not a fool. For sure. I'm not going to go on some rant about politics or some dumb like sports meme show. I'm just going to have my normal show. So, anyway, no fake outs here. So today, as the title would show, I'm going to talk about some potential rule changes the NFL that have been proposed to the NFL. I believe there have been 13 submitted. I might not get into all of them because some of them definitely aren't going to happen, or I couldn't explain them to you because we didn't actually get an explanation, just some like one sentence summary that told us nothing. With that being said, some of them are interesting. I'm going to get into my top 10 edge rushers, edge defenders, whatever you want to call them, in the NFL draft later in the show. This one has been really tough. I guess I keep saying this, like after you get past a certain point, it gets really hard. Because especially at the bottom of your top 10, you're usually in a bigger tier of players and you're trying to sort through them. And it might be more instructive if during this last month leading into the draft, because this is draft month, that I do more of a tier list for prospects rather than, say, doing just like top 10s. And I'm probably going to do like a deep dive into several positions, particularly the wide receiver position group is so deep. It is ridiculous how good this receiver class is. And I think, well, and the offensive line class, particularly the tackles. Although the center class, like at the top, is really, really good. And there's a lot of really good guards, and the tackle class is so good that I think it's pushing some guys into guard that would be drafted as tackles in other years, particularly Elijah Vera Tucker and potentially Alex Leatherwood of Alabama. Tucker is from USC. Yeah. And a couple other guys who could end up getting moved inside, because there's a lot of people who are like, well, we think Rashawn Slater could be an awesome tackle. We just know he'll be like potentially a Quentin Nelson level guard. Not that he's the exact same player as Quentin Nelson. He's quicker and faster, a little more agile. Not quite as powerful as Nelson. Not that he isn't super strong, like really strong. He's just a little bit smaller. So, but that might be something to think about moving forward. I'm also going to do. Oh, I'm sorry. I might get into the Deshaun Watson case again, which I probably should have put that in the title of the video, but uh, that would probably be like a middle segment of the show, because I would want to pull up like the latest. I will say, just to give a short update on what's going on with Deshaun Watson, he's up to like 21 civil suits filed against him at this point, and the last 3 were not new. So like he had gotten to where there were 18 women accusing him. These latest 3 suits involve him allegedly deleting Instagram posts or messages, and then contacting some of these plaintiffs to just go ahead and settle, allegedly. We don't know if that's for certain, although there would obviously, I guess, in those lawsuits, from what I saw, I don't know if they offered necessarily proof of that in the suits filed exactly. Um, at least not at the time I documents. I don't know where to. I don't know if those things are available or not to the public, or like the biggest details, or where I would go to get them, which maybe is something I'll do. I'll look into for the future to like really do a deep dive on this at a later date. But he has had 18 women come out and defend him, which is interesting because most of the, or like in a lot of these these accusations, it's just the two of them. So I don't know what these other women, if these are just other masseuses who are saying like, he never made any advances towards them. Well, that doesn't matter. Um, because just because he didn't make any advances or do anything inappropriate to you doesn't mean he didn't. I mean that he didn't have inappropriate, you know, um, contact or do anything inappropriate to those women. And it also stands, that just because, or even in this whole scenario, just because people are alleging that something was of a specific level does not mean that there is an explanation where it was accidental or whatever, or that all this stuff happened, but in the time it was, or at least from his perspective, consensual. I don't know, and I don't want to get into all that. Uh, my preference is to not put myself in situations where uh, something can be misconstrued. Uh, if you don't want to be accused of sexual assault, one, don't sexually assault or harass people, but also, if you don't want to be accused of those things, don't put yourself in positions where you can be accused of those things even when you didn't do anything. Um, if you don't want to be accused of, raping someone that you had sex with, probably don't have sex with someone outside of marriage. That's my own opinion. And it's like I'm totally cool. Or for me, it's like I think that's the best defense. Um, I feel like personally living as a Christian, because that's something I want to put more um, into my show, is that I am a Christian. Um, and I want to try and view, or when things of a non, like, just football nature come into sport, or like a non-sports nature come into sports, like this stuff with Deshaun Watson. um, I think it's an opportunity to, share a Christian viewpoint and a viewpoint that can lead to positive, one, positive change. um, I'm struggling to word this, I guess, because I know some people are like, well, keep your religion out of sports, just like, it's like, because I would assume people coming to my channel would want to keep politics out of sports, which I for the most part agree with, like, or at least in my coverage of it, like, I don't. I'm a sports commentator, not a politician, um, not a political analyst. Even if I have my own political opinions that are well thought out, that's not what this show's for. However, when it comes to my Christian faith is everything. Um, I'm a Christian first and everything else second. And I would say this gives me the opportunity to talk about how men should conduct themselves, or at least how the Christian man should conduct himself. The Christian man doesn't put himself into scenarios, uh, or into inappropriate scenarios one-on-one with women. Um, that's just full stop. Um, my my genitalia is not going to brush up against some woman, um, like is alleged with Deshaun Watson, or even worse than that because there are some worse accusations. I'm trying not to say anything that YouTube would not find okay. But keep yourself out of those situations. It's like, and you won't get accused. You don't. It's like, for the most part, married men who are faithful. It's like married men who are faithful to their wives. They don't get accused of this stuff. They don't have these issues because they're doing the right things. They're not putting themselves in bad situations. They're not doing things outside of the proper order of things. Um, and when I say like, you know, like Christian men, I don't mean people who just say, give thanks to God for, giving me these gifts, or, you know, first I want to thank God for, making all this possible, da 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 da. But then you see them out clubbing, TMZ's catching them at like this and that, or with this person or that person. They're constantly dating around and or sleeping around. You know, sorry, this is getting off on a little bit, a little bit of a kind of a what is it, a moral rant or whatever. But I think this is a big thing with the Deshaun Watson thing is if you don't put yourself if you don't put yourself in these situations, no accusations can be made. I mean, sure they can, but you know, they would be completely crazy and outlandish because it would totally go against. There wouldn't be 18 people lining up against you. Whether you think it's like whether you're in the camp that thinks it's a little suspicious that all these women just held on to the story for so long and all their stories happen to be almost pretty much exactly identical, or that if you're in the camp that's like, dude, 18 people are accusing this guy of the same thing. We've seen it before. It's like, dude seems like a little bit of a predator. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm just disappointed in the guy to be honest, regardless of whether he was if it was that bad or not. Um, there are a lot of people who get tons of massages that never have any accusations go against them because they went there for a massage. Um, I mean, we don't know what happened. We don't know what's gonna come out in these civil suits. Um, we have a lot of accusations, but we don't really have much of a defense from Watson except these things didn't happen. Which, I mean, if they didn't, that should be a fine defense. So, but unfortunately for unfortunately for Watson, and personally, I think unfortunately for the public, these are civil suits. These aren't even criminal lawsuits. Criminal lawsuits, you have to have a pretty high bar for evidence. Like, these are serious accusations. And there's a reason I think that they're going to civil court. Because civil court has a lower bar. There's not going to be any criminal damages to him unless something really crazy comes out in the civil suits that just, it's, necessitates criminal investigation. But civil suits tend to be about monetary damages, not getting, people locked up. Oh crap, my stream cut out and I don't know how long it cut out for. Hopefully these little stream hiccups are they're going to be fixed here in a bit. I am moving to a different space and or where I'm setting up that I should be able to hopefully fix those issues by getting everything like hardwired correctly. So, but anyway, like I was saying, with the Watson thing, it is way too early for us to even be falling on any side of this thing or really forming opinions as the public because these cases haven't been gone through yet. We don't know anything. Like, really, we don't know anything. These things haven't been tested or tried or proven true or false or possible or not. So I would suggest everyone, like, we should reserve judgment on this whole thing, on the people accusing Watson and on Watson himself, regardless of what our biases are. So yeah, there's that. The NFL has proposed some rule changes. There was a big, let's see, I might pull this up real quick. Sorry for if this kind of blinds my face or whatever for a sec. I'm looking for, here it is. NFL rule changes. All right, I'll look back at that when I need it. Some of the bigger rule changes. So the competition committee, from what I understand, has recommended this one. Judge, the potential of a sky judge, like an eighth official who is not on the field, who has access to, television replay and all this other stuff to help get calls right. Well, the competition committee doesn't want to do that, because at that point, then it's like, well, why don't we just put all of our officials, pull them off the field, except for like the, the head referee who, would make all the calls, and maybe the umpire to set the ball, but have them both basically, just be, for specific actions on the field and for relaying the actual calls from officials in the booth watching things. And I can understand the argument against, because like the idea of like what the biggest problem with the idea of the sky judge is that people aren't going to care what the other officials say. The sky judge will be all that matters. Everyone's just going to want to know what the sky judge has to say. The sky judge would basically become the most powerful official on the field, in a sense, because he would have, potentially. Well, I mean, obviously you could limit that, because this is what the idea of what they're proposing is a very limited, a limited expansion of replay reviews, and the current, booth review officials, and other officiating department people being allowed to be a little more involved in reviews, and expanding different, or some things that can be, that they can rule on or provide guidance on rulings on. So some of these things that they are proposing to imbue the booth with is the ability to give their, to share their own personal judgments on whether, possession on catches, interceptions. From the way it's worded, it almost sounds like whether something should be a catch or an interception. Ball placement, like the spot of the ball. And some other stuff, but not like should a penalty have been called there, things of that nature. Which I have been a little bit of a proponent of the idea of taking officials off the field, putting them in the booth, and giving them, better ability to see the field, things of that nature. However, this is the flip side. On any given play, there's at least one, if not multiple, infractions made that are not called. Usually and many times because they're not really that egregious. Like, there's nothing worse than, like, a play's happening on the right side of the field, but a receiver on the left side of the formation, like, grabbed a dude, and it had no effect on the play. Or a running back with 4.4 speed is flying down the sideline to the end zone unopposed, but 15 yards behind him, a guard snagged a defensive lineman who wasn't going to catch up. And you could say, well, the offensive line was being stupid. Yeah. But at the same time, that interaction had no effect on the outcome of the play at that point. Why was it called? So the idea is if you add a sky judge, or even for the detractors worse, you put the officials in the booth, they're going to see everything. There's going to be flags all the time, or they're personally just going to pick and choose when they decide to throw flags for things, which kind of like how it is now, in a way. But it would lead to officials having potentially even more power over that and sway over the outcomes of games. The other upside, though, is, well, people stop committing penalties and we see how the game would be played if people actually followed all these rules, or we find out that, well, if we're going to do this, then we need to change the rules to where some of this stuff that happens every play maybe is considered more legal. And then people have to adapt in that direction. I don't know. I honestly don't know what the best answer is to that. The biggest change would be accountability, or the biggest distractors for, holding referees accountable has been, well, if we make referees so scrutinized, they're already scrutinized enough, people aren't going to want to go into it. And they're saying that that's already the case. And I'm like, actually, it's not as much that that's true as that we have good referees that a lot of leagues are trying to get younger and pay people less. And they're not training them enough. It's really that there's a cross-section of they're not being trained well enough, and the NFL, pushed a lot of guys into retirement. So a bunch of spots came open at the same time. And then you get a guy like Al Riveron, who they will not move out of his position, despite the fact that he's done a bad job. Everyone dislikes him. The players dislike him. The fans dislike him. Coaches dislike him. A lot of officials dislike Al Riveron. And a lot of people in the league office dislike Al Riveron and don't believe he's done a good job. But Roger Goodell and the owners also don't want to act like they made a mistake in putting him in that position for whatever reason. Heck, we can fire Steve Wilkes after 1 year on the job in Arizona. And hire Cliff Kingsbury. But we can't fire this dude. So. And I do get some argument for if we're heavily criticizing officials, if we are heavily criticizing officials, then maybe they won't want to be officials. They won't want to do the job. I would counter with, they're a necessary part of the game. They need to be trained well, and you're putting yourself in a public position just like the players. You're going to get criticized. If anything, you should be expected to be good at your job and do a good job. You should want people to respect you for doing a good job. You should want to do the best job possible. And maybe you think you are, but I think it's been proven time and time again when it's not like little subtle stuff that they miss. I mean, that Saints-Rams game still lingers in many fans' minds of just being egregious. The NFC Championship game this year, where Sean Murphy Bunting of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was allowed to hold pretty much the entire game, including on a play where he made an interception. But Kevin King does it, and they call it. When the Packers were getting a very important stop late in the game, if that penalty is not called. It's just you let them play until you didn't. You let them do it until you didn't. That's inconsistency. You have to be consistent in your job. If the referees aren't going to be consistent about how they apply objective rules, subjective enforcement for objective rules does not work. It only makes people angry. So you either throw the flag every time you see it, or you don't throw the flag. Or you throw the flag only on the most egregious ones. Which sounds great, but then it's like, well, then what? Who defines what egregious is? Because if that's your excuse, which I heard that as an explanation on the King one, it's like, well, the one where Bunting got the interception was pretty egregious as well. It's just frustrating. So, and I'm a big proponent of the Sky Judge because it at least gives us a peek into the potential of like what having every ref in the booth would look like. And that has been proposed, by the way. This is the thing though with rules changes. Typically, rules changes, if they are not, if the competition committee doesn't approve them, like if the competition committee doesn't put it forward, it's not happening, typically. But I believe it was the Ravens, and it might have been the Ravens and the Eagles, because the Ravens and Eagles did several like joint proposals. And it might have been just the Ravens. I know the Eagles might have been involved as well in proposing like the actual Sky Judge, the eighth, like an eighth official added to the team who is put, who is not on the field and has access to television replay and other, things. So that's kind of the big thing. The Eagles proposed. Well, they proposed something last year, and I can't remember. Maybe I should pull this up to make sure I'm calling out the right teams for different things. Let's see. So let's look at some of these proposals. A significant restriction. Okay, so this actually is a big deal. It's a significant restriction on blocking below the waist, 2 yards outside of the offensive tackles, like where they're positioned at the start of the play, and 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. So basically, they're wanting to limit blocks below the waist, which I'm okay with because, well, this is my opinion on blocking below the waist. You're basically tackling the defender, which, from what I've always understood, is holding or clipping, an illegal block. Because, like, defensive players, there's no reason for, like, defensive players to go at offensive linemen's legs. So they're not necessarily at risk for a defensive lineman lunging at below their waist. Blocks like that can lead to severe, like, leg injuries, knee, ankle injuries from having a 330-pound right guard just dive into your lower leg and potentially bend it, cause your knee, like your thigh, to go inward while your lower leg stays outward. It just, I've never really been a big fan of that kind of blocking. And with a lot of the advantages the offenses already have, it would be nice that the offense can't tackle defenders to create running lanes or things of that nature. Or in the screen game. You should have to man up and actually put your body on somebody's body and out-muscle them. That's how blocking's supposed to be. So I think that would actually be a potential positive change. Although it is the NFL, so we need to be wary about their implementation of changes because they screw things up all the time. Let's see. What else do we have here? they are talking about eliminating overtime in the preseason. I would be okay with that. Preseason games don't, like, the outcomes of preseason games don't matter. It's the reps for the players involved that matter. This one's an interesting one because I don't totally understand this one. This involves onside kicks. So, like, in recent years, especially since the shift in up the field on onside kicks, it's made it harder for the onside or the kicking team. It's becoming almost impossible to recover an onside kick unless your team is retarded. And yes, you know exactly what NFL game I'm talking about last year. You know exactly what team I'm talking about. Allowing a maximum of 9 players in the setup zone, the 15-yard area behind the restraining line when set up for a kickoff return. So basically, I still don't know what that's necessarily going to change, though. This proposal could make it a little bit easier to recover an onside kick since the 2018 revamp of kickoffs. The Eagles proposed a more radical change. So this is the Eagles' proposal, and I really like it. A radical change giving teams an option for one play to gain 15 yards to keep possession after a score. But that suggestion, and similar suggestions to that have come up already, but they've been vetoed in the past. So I think what the idea is, so the kickoff is now at the 35-yard line. So the restraining line for the kickoff, like the return team, is the 45-yard line on the kicking team side of the field. So there's a 15-yard area called the setup zone that they would only be able to have 9 players in, which, from what I understand, most formations only have 9, even on onside kick returns. Like, you still have a guy back deep, typically. And the other kind of, because a lot of teams run 2 return men, there's usually another guy who's not quite with all that group, who's kind of in a middle area, kind of off to the opposite side, in case they try to kick away from that return man deep to the short side. But I guess some teams have been running 10 in that area. I mean, I don't know. For the most part, I'm like, you usually only see 9 people in that area anyway, so I don't know what that actually changes. Unless you're going to change also how they align and how many people can be over there. Because the kicking team can only have so many people on one side or the other of the kicker, on onside kicks as well, or on any kicking formation as well. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily know how that's really going to change things. I guess the idea is the kicking team would have the ability to have 5 guys on either side of the kicker, and one side if they just ran an even, like, 5 and 5, you would have 4 return team players on one side and 5 on the other. So that would give you a potential weak side to the play at all times, and give you a potential numbers advantage on one side. So I guess that could help. The issue there is, though, you still have to get the ball 10 yards, and the kicking team gets to set up literally or the return team gets to set up 10 yards away. You still have to get it to the return. Personally, I'm a huge fan of the idea of having a play to get, maybe 15 yards instead. And if, the attempt fails, the team just gets the ball at like where you would, or maybe at like, the kicking team's 40. I don't know exactly. There could be several different ways to propose that. That's something I would like to see. Let's see. There's this is another one, and this has to do specifically to do with when the Browns, I think it was the Browns, picked up Mark Ingram during the playoffs last year. Playoff teams being restricted from signing players who were cut by teams whose seasons are already over. So when the Ravens lost or in the first round of the playoffs, they cut Mark Ingram. Or should I say they cut him during the playoffs, and which actually it might even be that. It might just be that, team seasons in, they may start making roster moves. Playoff teams don't get to just start picking up guys who get cut by teams whose seasons are already over. I actually think that's totally legit. It's like if the guy's not on your team, like, and I think it's interesting because I think it also might be a reaction to some backlash that's going on in the NBA right now, where there are some, particularly it seems like small market teams, although some people would also maybe call it bad teams, are irritated by the buyout market right now, that LaMarcus Aldridge or the Spurs can buy out LaMarcus Aldridge's contract, and then he just goes to the Nets, who are way over the luxury tax, and he's just playing for the minimum. A solution that's being bandied about in the NBA for that issue is that maybe if you were to pick up someone off the buyout market, you should have to pay some semblance or a decent chunk of the money that the previous team is supposed to be paying for. So, but I don't know if anything's going to change. Personally, my thing is, if you're a title contending team, you're probably going to be able to get guys on the buyout market. That's just it. And typically there's a reason that guy's getting bought out. It's not like, LaMarcus Aldridge is still a useful player, but obviously it's like this season the Spurs would play better when he's not on the court. Blake Griffin got bought out by the Pistons. He looks like a shell of himself. Andre Drummond was getting in the way of, potential development of Cleveland's players. They tried to trade him, but no one was trading for that contract. And then he's going to the Lakers, where I still don't know if Andre Drummond actually impacts whether a team wins or loses a game. His stats just seem to not matter. Like, he doesn't kill your team, but it doesn't seem like he helps it that much either. So he gets big rebounding numbers, but historically his teams have actually rebounded worse as a team when he's on the court. Which seems like a little bit of an oxymoron. So let's see. Oh, this is an interesting one because I'm like, this wasn't already a thing. Requiring teams to report tryouts and visits to the league office throughout the year. So, like, you would have to report to the league office that we're trying out this person, whatever. So these were, I believe, like competition committee proposals. These are the team proposals. A proposal from the Baltimore Ravens to add an 8th official. So it was just the Ravens adding. It was just the Ravens who were adding. Basically, the sky judge. A revamp of overtime, which this is from the Ravens and the Eagles. This is one of their joint proposals that would require the winner of the coin toss to choose one of two options: where to spot the ball or which team will get the first possession. So instead of having I guess what that would be is instead of having a kickoff, you would just start, I guess maybe at your own 25-yard line or something. I don't know. That's not that specific, actually, of reporting. Like, is that getting rid of an overtime kickoff? Another overtime option from the Ravens and Eagles that would... This is what I mean by does not tell us anything. Another overtime option from the Ravens and Eagles that would create true sudden death. I don't know what that means. Gets to choose to get the ball in like the 5-yard line. If they score, they win. If they don't, they lose. Is it the ball set at the 50-yard line and you put your fastest player on your goal line and they both run for the ball? And whoever gets it wins the game? I don't know what that means. Does anyone? It's like, why put out that as a press release and not give us any context? Let's see, next. A rule change from the Rams to impose a loss of down if a second forward pass from behind the line of scrimmage or from behind the line and for a pass thrown after the ball returns behind the line. The Rams had a play like that work against them last season when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tom Brady, caught his own pass, then threw it again. I think I remember that, or I think I remember this. I believe like he threw a pass that got batted back to him, like it crossed the line of scrimmage and came back, and then he threw it again. This isn't like when Marcus Mariota like caught it and ran for a touchdown, which I think was kind of cool. And I almost want to say that they try to make a rule against it, or have made a rule where you can't like advance the ball in those scenarios, which I think that's stupid. If that's the case, but the idea is you can't throw the ball after you've thrown the ball forward. That's already a rule. What they're wanting, I guess, is to impose like a just total loss of down, which I already thought that was a rule. So that's interesting. And the last one is a request from the Kansas City Chiefs to relax rules for uniform numbers. Which, that's interesting. I don't know why you would need to relax the rules for uniform numbers. Well, I could actually, you know what, now to think about it, if you had all of your defensive linemen, if you wanted all of like your front, like defensive front type players, like guys who you like defensive tackles, defensive ends, pass rushing linebackers to wear 90. Well, still. Or if you wanted like actually this would probably be more likely, if you wanted all your edge players and linebackers to wear numbers in the 50s. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know why you would need to relax the rules on uniform numbers, actually. Yeah, I don't. Unless you don't like using certain specific numbers. Ooh. Now, actually, I could see a scenario. So, in college or in basketball, there's a reason you don't see or at least this is a rule in college. I don't think it is in the NBA. Well, it can't be because Luka Doncic wears 77. In college basketball, there is a restriction in college basketball that players cannot wear any number that cannot fit on two hands. So, like, this is why you don't see players wearing, like, 17 in college basketball, or at least from my understanding. Because when referees call fouls, they hold up the number of the player. So it has to be like a number that falls within, or that you can put on like two hands. So like you could say 9, although you could also confuse this with 45, so that would be kind of weird. But typically, it's why you see like 0, like you can anything from through 0 and anything through 5. So like you can have 55, but you can't have 56. You can have 34, but you can't have, or I mean, yeah, I mean you could have 34, but you couldn't have like 38, whatever. It's possible that maybe you're wanting to make your substitutions easier or something like that, and so you would like it to be more like the college game. So I could, have guys who on both sides of the ball wear like 25 or 22. Because, most teams like running backs wear somewhere in the 20s or 30s or the 40s. But your defensive backs also wear in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Now, the argument against that is like, bro, you probably at max run 4 running backs on your roster. It's like a lot of teams don't even have a fullback anymore. And if they do, he's one of those 4 running backs. You have 5, maybe 6 corners. Or let's just say you're probably running 9 defensive backs, maybe 10. You mean to tell me you need, out of literally 30 numbers, you can't fit 14 guys in those numbers? So I don't know what the Chiefs are needing that for. But those are some of the rules proposals. I'd love to see the Ravens Sky Judge proposal, or happen, but it ain't. By the way, these proposals, the NFL owners meetings are coming out. Those proposals will 24 of the 32 teams, or team owners, or governors, whatever. Owners. I'm not calling them governors. They're not elected. 24 of the 32 have to approve it. So, like, 3/4 of the league has to approve any rule change, which is a pretty nice system, actually. Sure, it can mean that it's hard to get change, but at the same time, it means that it is really hard for stupid to happen. Or, well, we are talking about the NFL. So, but it does make it harder for stupid to happen. So yeah. So those are those are the big rules changes. From there, if you are viewing the show, we're at the hour, or just about the hour mark. So take this opportunity to say, if you're enjoying the show, please drop a like, hit subscribe. If you want more of the channel, want to know when I'm going live, hit that bell icon next to the subscribe button, notifications to all. That way, YouTube can't or doesn't forget to send you a notification when I go live. or if I end up posting videos, which that might be something that's coming here once I've moved spaces. And if you are listening, if you jump in the chat, drop a question, I will read your questions and I will answer them. That is way more fun to me than just about anything. I love that back and forth. It also, a lot of times, it's stuff I haven't been thinking about, so it gives me a chance to think on my feet. I enjoy doing that. Un momento while I take a sip of water. Hopefully that wasn't too loud or gross or bothersome. Oh, didn't have a mic back. So, yeah, with that being said, some big news in the college basketball world. Roy Williams has retired as the head coach of North Carolina basketball, men's basketball. Sorry, Maria Taylor, men's basketball. Except I actually left out the men's the first time. ESPN did not. If you don't know about that, I might get into it later. Maria Taylor made herself look dumb on Twitter again. So Roy Williams is out at UNC. I think I mentioned on a stream, or maybe it was someone else I was talking to off stream. But, my belief that some of these coaches that have been around for a long time, it was time for them to go. Well, Roy Williams is gone. He is retired from basketball, from coaching after 33 years of coaching. I think that was what it was. And I believe he started off, or I believe his first big job, I think he was at Kansas actually, before North Carolina or something like that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But UNC will be looking for a new basketball coach. And I believe I saw a headline that the University of Texas might have or that they might have made a coaching change. So actually, let me pull up ESPN again. Let's see, source. Yeah, here we are. Sources: Texas Longhorns expected. I hate how ESPN just autoplays videos above articles, like the ads. So the Texas Longhorns are expected to hire Texas Tech's Chris Beard as their new head basketball coach. So that means Shaka Smart is out. I guess I missed that if they already fired him. Beard's buyout to go to another Big 12 school is $4 million. So Texas is paying $4 million just to then sign Beard to a multi-million-dollar contract. He was making nearly $5 million a year at Tech. Texas has offered him a chance to be at one of the best jobs in the country. Well, Texas Tech has apparently been as good or better a job than Texas recently. This is interesting. So he's been at Tech since 2016. I'm trying to look at who he replaced. Yeah, Shaka Smart, who left Tech. Oh, okay. So Smart left Texas for Marquette last week. I guess I missed that. It's crazy also to think that Smart's had been at Texas for 6 years at this point. So yeah, so that's pretty big. So Shaka Smart is also the new coach at Marquette, and I would say he might end up doing better at Marquette than he did at Texas. Because I actually think that the University of Texas, despite having deep pockets and lots of resources and lots of people want to go there, I feel like there's so much distraction and disruption around their programs that they're actually worse jobs than their resources would lead you to believe. So I'd rather coach at Marquette than the University of Texas. So there's a little bit of college. And we're back. Sorry, another stream hiccup. Like I said, when Gonzaga and Baylor make it to the title game and Gonzaga wins, it will have been arguably the easiest tournament winner decision of my entire life. So, but that's it for the college basketball. I think I'm going to go ahead and get into my top 10 edge rushers for the draft this month. I'm also, speaking of draft content, I will be doing probably division by division breakdowns here in the next month. Now that we've gotten most of free agency out of the way, I'll be having streams that are specifically going team by team by division, and doing big, like, what needs they still have, or out of what they have, what they should target and when I think they should target them. Prospects in different ranges for their needs that they should hit. Some teams it's going to be really easy because they don't have very many weaknesses and they can just draft best player available, or because of depth at those positions they can be a little more lenient with addressing need. Team that comes to mind would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, they need, like, the only thing I could say is like a pressing need. And when I say pressing, like, it's still not that like necessarily backbreaking. They need, like, they run a 3-4 scheme mostly, although it's a little bit of a multiple scheme under Todd Bowles. They could, I don't think Ndamukong Suh came back. I can't remember if Ndamukong Suh came back to the Bucs. Even if he did, they still need to address interior line, the two spots on either side of Vita Vea, their nose tackle, who is a beast. And, of course, those spots occupy the gaps between Vita Vea and edge defenders Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaq Barrett. And they also could use edge rushing depth because everyone can. But they are so young and deep at pretty much every other position, or they have young depth with veterans at every other position, that they can basically do whatever they want throughout the draft. And they can target the needs they have, they can target it just about anywhere. This isn't like a super deep interior line draft or like a super talented. There are a number of guys I really like, but they're back half of the very back end of the first round, second round, third round, fourth round types. Like Christian Barmore, if he's available with their first round pick, would definitely be a fit, but they don't have to target that position like that high. There are guys who could go later, like Davian Nixon of Iowa. Looks like a second round guy. Osa Odigizua out of UCLA. Could be a good fit. They could probably get him they might be able to get him in round 3 somewhere. Either moving down, although he definitely should be around at their late second round pick. Sorry, I'm getting too deep into that, but that's the idea. Like, they can just draft best player available and maybe hit needs down the board. Like, their first round pick, they should just pick whoever the best player is on their board, because they're loaded with young talent, or young and veteran talent at so many positions. Like, at corner, they have a bunch of young starters. You can always use more corner depth, but, there's plenty of, like, solid corners in this draft in the second to fourth round range. Heck, second to fifth round range even. Um, they're really good at safety, or they're really solid at safety. Like Anton Winfield should improve in year 2, and he was pretty freaking good for a rookie. Their offense is stacked. Their biggest need on offense would be just more talent at running back, I would say. Like, they brought Fournette back. They still have Keyshawn Vaughn. But I I would argue that kind of like the Chiefs did last year, although the Bucs roster is even more complete, I think, than the Chiefs. Because I think the Chiefs could have used something. They could have picked some stuff at 32 that they didn't. That would have helped them last year more than Edwards-Helaire ended up helping them out. Although a lot of the running game's problems last year was more to do with the interior offensive line and injuries to guys on all over the offensive line. Um, the Bucs can do basically whatever. So, and then you have teams like the Texans who don't have any picks, so they can't do anything. Or the Seahawks who have 3 draft picks. The Seahawks have 3, count them, 3 draft picks. Only and a second rounder, a 4th rounder, and a 7th rounder. Yikes. Hopefully they nail the undrafted market. That's what happens when you trade, multiple first-round picks for a safety. Even a good one like Jamal Adams, still an overpay. So we'll get into, it's like I will be going division by division. I haven't decided exactly where I'm going to start. Although I'm probably going to start in the AFC East. Because all of those teams are fascinating for different reasons. Because the Bills are really good, and if they nail this draft, could turn into or it's like if their picks really hit this year, not only could they continue to be contenders for this year, like they might be putting themselves in pole position for the next few years. Dolphins have a ton of capital, have signaled they're building around Tua, which they'd already signaled they were building around Tua and people were just being stupid. The Jets, we still don't know, is it Darnold or are they drafting a quarterback at number 2? Obviously, the 49ers end up making a trade with the Dolphins. You'd think they would have approached the Jets probably first, meaning the Jets probably waved them off, either thinking they'll get a better trade near to the draft from a quarterback needy team, or they're drafting a quarterback, or they just think that whoever they're going to draft at 2 is worth whatever the trade is, which I don't know about that. Because the amount of picks it would take to move up to 2, pretty much worth it. And Sam Darnold's not an old, he's still a young quarterback. He's only 23. Like Kyle Trask is older than Sam Darnold. And Darnold already has 3 years of NFL experience. Not that I think Trask is going that high. I'm using him as an example. Like Trask is going to be a rookie this year, and he is older than Sam Darnold, or as old as Sam Darnold. And I think new offensive coordinator, yada yada yada. You put some real weapons around him. You trade down the board for a QB needy team, like say Carolina decides to move up from 8 to 2. That would mean then you've got Atlanta, who could draft a quarterback. I don't think they do. So picks 4 through 7 are likely going to be offensive players, either tackles or receivers or Kyle Pitts, you're still going to get one of like the top 5 non-quarterback offensive players, or just top 5 non-quarterbacks in the draft who are worthy of top 10 consideration at 8. You're going to get someone out of Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Kyle Pitts, Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater at 8 if you're the Jets. Plus whatever Carolina gives you in that trade. Or maybe the Broncos move up from 9 to 2. You don't, I mean, we don't, it's like you still don't know. Like what's going to happen at this point. But I still am kind of leaning that I think the Jets are just going to go ahead and take a quarterback, and they're going to try and trade Sam Darnold. I don't know. But that division is fascinating. And then, of course, you have the Patriots with their offseason of spending, which some people are like, some of these contracts don't look too good, and they're a little bit of overpays. And I'm like, yeah, well, most of these guys look like really good football players. And the Patriots needed good football players. And typically speaking, New England, when they have spent in free agency, they've actually tended to spend pretty well. When they choose to pay people, they tend to choose to pay the right people. Which, that would be my argument for their offseason. Although I like most of their signings. And I like the Aguilar signing. I had reported it at 2 years, 26, because that is what I'd seen. That deal actually came in at 2 years, 22 million, with basically only money in the first year guaranteed, from what I saw. So that actually made the deal look a little bit better to me. And they've done a good job of using receivers like Aguilar when they brought him in. They traded for Brandon Cooks. Cooks was really good for them. They won a Super Bowl. I believe they won the Super Bowl with Brandon Cooks on their roster. You look at you look at Damiere Byrd, who's been there, super fast receiver like that. He wasn't like a lead or anything, but he had the best years, or like he had the best stretch of his career in a Patriots uniform by far. Aguilar's coming off a really good year with the Raiders. He had a couple really good years with the Eagles, particularly the year they won the Super Bowl. I think that the Patriots will likely get as much as anyone else could out of Aguilar. And you pair him with Henry and Smith, the tight ends they brought in. And if they draft a receiver at 15, which I think is very possible, I'm kind of bullish on them. So like the AFC East, probably I'm gonna start. And I'm kind of vamping here because I don't know if my edge rusher thing is gonna take up till when I want to actually end the show. But I will it's like I know I'm doing a little bit of breakdown now, but I'm gonna do like real deep dives on each division and its teams for the NFL draft over the next month. Probably gonna start next week, but we will see. It's either gonna be next week or the week after. I'm also going to be ramping up NBA content too. I've just been really focused on NFL offseason stuff, NFL draft, because football, college, and pro is my first love. Ooh. So it's a little stuffy in here. That's another reason I'm kind of excited for moving to my new spot. So yeah, we're gonna get in the top 10 edge defenders. So reason I'm saying edge defenders, I used when I talked about linebackers, I talked about off-ball linebackers. So those are like your 3-4 inside linebackers and your 4-3 linebackers. Guys who, which your 4-3 strong, a lot of times will line up on the line of scrimmage, but these are guys that are going to spend more time in coverage than going after like the quarterback. If they are, they're blitzers, not necessarily. Um, they're not necessarily guys who are super skilled at beating like tackles one on one with like advanced pass rushing moves and techniques, whatever. These are guys who are they're going to be covering tight ends. They're going to be dropping into zones in the middle of the field, in the flats, covering running backs out of the backfield, and playing sideline to sideline, filling gaps in the run game, that sort of thing. Potentially like setting the edge on in run defense, but these are your run and hit kind of players. And guys who, or like that's what I'm talking about with off-ball linebackers. So for edge rushers, this is your 4-3 ends and 3-4 outside linebackers, and these are guys whose primary focus is I'm playing on the edge of the defense, I'm playing on the line of scrimmage, I am attacking offensive tackles, and setting the edge so my off-ball linebackers can get into the backfield. That's and I a lot of, especially the way the league has trended now, especially with sub packages, with so much time being spent in the nickel, the 3-4-4-3 designation doesn't always, or isn't quite as important as it used to be, because schemes are different. So I put them together, and a lot of people put them together as edge defenders. So for me, and particularly, I predicate the edge defender position as edge rushing and edge setting in the run game, but I like the guys who have coverage versatility too. But my biggest focus in grading edge defenders is, can you dominate offensive tackles? Do you, with speed and or power? Do you have like what your technique is? How many pass rushing moves you have in your arsenal that you are comfortable using and effective using in like defeating offensive tackles in pass rush situations, and how you play versus the run on the edge. Like, how good are you at diagnosing the difference in like and making plays in the run game? And with that, I'm starting with my number one guy, Jalen Phillips, out of Miami. He was dominant this year. He transferred from UCLA, and he doesn't have a ton of tape before like this year, or he has like gap years because of injuries, particularly like concussion issues, which has a lot of people have him like lower on their boards, and he probably won't be the first guy drafted. He might not even be the second or third edge rusher drafted. I think he's the best, though. He has an incredible first step. A lot of people, or most people, would say he's not as explosive as Kawhi Paye, which is probably true. But he has a great first step. I should say he has a great first step off the edge. He has really great speed off the edge, really good bend. Like, he has a really, really good speed rush. But he is really good with his hands. He's really good at using the long arm technique. Uh, what you'll see with like a long arm is when they're rushing, they'll lean and they'll use, and he has really great, really long arms. They'll use that long arm and they'll post, basically kind of use the offensive lineman as a counterweight's probably not the right word, but to support a lot of their body weight so they can lean under the kind of lower and bend around and keep the offensive lineman's arms off of them. Some simple counters for that. It's like, now there is a fairly simple counter that I mentioned Tevin Jenkins in my top 10 offensive tackles video. And Brett Coleman, who did a video on Jalen Phillips, also did a recent video on Tevin Jenkins. And I'd really suggest subbing to Brett's channel. It's Brett, Brett, Coleman, Kollman, or is it? Yeah, Man. He does great videos. If you're wanting, to learn things from those videos, or if you're wanting to learn about the game and like different techniques and things of that nature, he breaks these down, and it benefits you when you're watching actual games and evaluating players for yourself, because now you start seeing those things. So yeah, love Brett's videos. He uses a little bit of language, and I will warn, like, he does this little bit where he makes some kind of like mixed beverage before most of his videos, so your mileage may vary with that. I like the information. I think he does a really good job with his videos. So, for people who care about that, he doesn't get like drunk on his videos. They're like small beverages. So I will say that. Anyway, Brett was talking about Jenkins having this really, really good counter for the long arm maneuver. And it's that when they go to long arm him, he just kind of delays and kind of leans back a little, causing them to miss him with their arm, putting them off balance, and then he just pancakes them to the ground. It sounds like stupid simple to like counter, but you'd be surprised how many offensive linemen aren't comfortable enough getting off of the way they're doing things. Tevin Jenkins is a genius, and he's like, I already loved watching the guy because he's probably the most violent man in the draft. But he's also one of like the sneaky smartest. Like, this guy's like, if you could merge Brian Bulaga with Michael Orr, that's Tevin Jenkins to me. He's got that nasty mean streak in the run game, but he's immensely strong. But man, is he cerebral in his approach to tackle position. Sorry, I'm getting onto him, but Jalen Phillips is my number. He has counters for things the offensive linemen throw at him. When they were playing Clemson, they had this really athletic right tackle. I'm trying to remember his name. I've forgotten it. But really long, and he was shutting down that long arm move. So instead, he started, and this guy, he was really good at getting his hands out quick. Because actually, it wasn't that he was using the long arm move. He was setting up a different way, and then he switched to the long arm. Because what it does is what happens on the long arm is you're turning your body sideways, so it's harder for like the linemen to get their hands on you without potentially grabbing you. Like, they can't just shoot their arms out, like they're having to it just messes with their ability to get their hands on you. And so it makes you a slimmer target to them. and it's creating distance because usually, or your arm stretched out this way is typically longer than their arm stretched out forward, especially if you are a big, long pass rusher like Jalen Phillips. And it allows you to use your speed and agility and create leverage to get around. He has rip moves to knock hands away or the offensive lineman's hands away, and you know swim over the top. Like he has a really nice rip swim counter back to the inside. Once he's got the offensive lineman, you know, shooting outside in their stance like really heavily. He just has he's really smart, and he makes adjustments mid game. Like you can have him for a long time. Eventually Phillips figures out what to do, and then he starts getting pressure again. And that's why I think Phillips is the top edge rusher in this draft. After that, I like his teammate at Miami, although they didn't play together, because Rousseau was awesome as a true sophomore in 2019. I think it was a true sophomore. Or was he a freshman redshirt? Anyway, his first year like full-time starter, I believe, he had like, was it 15 and a half sacks? It was some ridiculous number. I believe it was 15 and a half. Rousseau is long. He's 6'7", like 255 or 260, 265, somewhere in there. And got as big as he is. His tape that year was really raw. I mean, most of it just came from him being able to physically dominate. Most of the tackles he faced. And there were things like in his run defense, pass defense that he wasn't a big, and pass rushing that was like, well, if he's not beating you this way, he's just not beating you, or it's very brute force and there's not as much technique to it. But you would expect that out of a, like 19 to 20-year-old player, in his first year playing, like at the collegiate level, like starting at the collegiate level. I would imagine that he has developed a lot, and he spent the entire last year working on his game, specifically with pass rushing coaches, just spending all kind of time just drilling, watching film, drilling these fundamentals, adding moves to his repertoire. Most young players progress from year to year in some form or fashion. I would have liked to see him on the field, but this guy had top end resources at his availability this year because he opted out of the season. He declared for the draft, and he, forewent any future college eligibility, signed with an agent who provided him with all this stuff, and then will, of course, get paid later upon his contract. Rousseau, I think, the sky's the limit for this guy. He has elite physical tools. Phillips, it's like, and I would say he and Paye probably have slightly better physical tools than Phillips, although Phillips has amazing physical tools. I would say all three of them have like just limitless potential. All these guys have superstar potential. I think some of this edge class doesn't have like an elite top guy. I'm like, I don't know. Phillips has like everything. He's got size. He's got like perfect frame, top end athleticism. He uses his hands and his mind like the Bosas and the Watts. Brett Coleman basically compared him as like a hybrid between TJ Watt and JJ Watt. And actually, I think that's kind of fair. And he plays the run game like him. So I'm going to get back. I'm going back to Jalen Phillips for just a second. This is another thing I wanted to mention. The way Jalen Phillips defends the run, a lot of times he doesn't traditionally like set the edge and try and wall off and push the play back to the middle. A lot of times he does what is called backdooring the defense. I think I've talked about this on a previous stream, but Phillips that blocker's trying to set up and kind of push him downfield this way. So what he does is he backdoors him to the inside of the play, and because of his elite or his top end quickness and explosion, he knifes behind, and then he'll get into the backfield. Occasionally, this would lead to there were a few instances on tape where this would lead to kind of bigger gains on around the outside for running back. But for the most part, it seemed like the scheme was definitely planned around that, and his linebacker usually would be getting to that spot. Because a lot of times when he does this, it causes that running back to have to kind of not necessarily juke backward, but kind of take a little bit of a wider angle around the edge. And for the most part, he was making way more plays in the backfield and at the line of scrimmage and blowing up plays than their defense was getting blown up by doing this. And the Steelers and the Texans, their schemes are built with TJ and JJ's tendencies to do that in mind. And I would say that Phillips is, if it wasn't for the concussion issues, I don't think there is a single doubt that Jalen Phillips would be a top 10 lock, personally. I think he's that good. And I think Russo is borderline in that range. I think he definitely should go in the teens, no doubt. And Russo has the frame, and he's younger than Phillips. Phillips is older than him and Paye. I believe he's older. I'm pretty sure he's older than Paye. But I think Phillips is phenomenal. Russo has a lot of room to grow, but he has immense physical traits. He's such a long defensive end that his long arm maneuver should be really hard to stop for a lot of offensive tackles, especially once he gets used to, once he is comfortable using different counters. If he develops a couple counter moves or some alternate moves to start with, Russo's going to be incredibly hard to stop, and I think he's going to get there more so than I believe in my third guy, which is Kwity Paye. Paye has incredible explosiveness. I believe I think he's a little bit shorter than the other two guys. I think he's the heaviest of the three, because I want to say he plays at like 6'4", like 270 something. He's thick. He's powerful. Out of the three, he's probably the most powerful player. Although that doesn't mean he's not explosive and doesn't have a really great first step, because he might have, out of those three guys, he might have the quickest first step too. And he has pretty decent production, but he doesn't have, I don't even think he has an 8-sack year. He might have 1 8-sack year, but his production's not as impressive as Russo's 1 year starting at Miami and Jalen Phillips this last year at Miami. And Russo and Phillips were getting more than just sacks. And Paye gets pressure without getting sacks. But I think he has a lot of work to do. And I do put a lot of weight in production when it comes to projection. And I might skew a little bit too much towards guys who are already somewhat developed, because I think, well, if they're already this good, where can they get? When it's possible those guys maybe are closer to their ceilings than, say, a guy who's not super developed, but that guy ends up way beyond them later on. I just think all these guys still have so much room to grow that I'm taking the guys that I think, or Ian Phillips, is more refined than the other two. But I would say Paye is right in that range with Russo. I would take Phillips and Russo ahead of Paye, though. But there are a lot of people who Paye is clearly their number one, their edge guy. And I respect that. Paye has incredible physical tools. A lot of Michigan, guys. Well, Michigan has a lot of guys who are physically dominant, but don't have a lot of production. I actually tend to like their guys who aren't as physically dominant, because they tend to end up panning out better historically. So far, Rashawn Gary hasn't really done much. and Paye kind of reminds me. They're not the same player, um, but there's a lot of similarities to them, and questions about consistency of production, things of that nature. I just I see how people project Paye as an elite prospect and with elite upside. Is he going to get there? I have more questions about him getting there than I do about Rousseau or Phillips. Because, once again, to me, production matters. I don't want to have to project the guy eventually getting good or eventually producing. If the guy's already producing, it means there's something there. There's something there. And I don't think it was just scheme at Miami for those two guys. Like, the tape bears that out. Paye has some really good, like, really interesting tape. I don't think it's as good as Phillips, and he wasn't as good as Rousseau at the same point in his career as Rousseau was when he was, like, Rousseau was producing at an elite level earlier in his career than Paye. Like, Paye's never gotten to that production, so that dings him just a little for me. That still doesn't mean he's a bad prospect. He's a great player. That's why he's number 3. Beyond that, there's a drop off because these guys could go in the back half of round 1 or end up like early to mid round 2. My number 4 edge player is, except I think he's got better coverage skills than Arakpo. Maybe not quite as good of a pure pass rusher, but he's very similar in that they are very powerful. Like, their speed to power is incredible. Osai has like driving power, and a good first step. But he's really good against the run. Arakpo was really good against the run as an edge player. I really liked him when he was with my Titans, and he was great with the Redskins. Arakpo is one of the strongest, like, 3-4 outside linebackers that I've ever seen. I don't know if Osai is quite as powerful, but he just reminds me of, another former Texas Longhorn. And I would put him at 4. There were games where he was just clearly the best defensive player on the field, and just was there were stretches of, like, he was everywhere. He's not necessarily as good in coverage as a lot of the off-ball backers that I've talked about, but for an edge player, he's got the ability to drop back in hook zones. There's some tight ends that he'll be able to actually cover and bother. He's really good at slipping in the flat. He's really good at faking blitzes and dropping into coverage, like baiting quarterbacks into things, batting down past the line of scrimmage, like getting into passing lanes and affecting throwing lanes. And he has sack production. I think at the NFL level, if he was, because Texas was having him drop a lot, I think if he was given pass rushing as his primary directive, he'd be an even more effective pass rusher than he was in college. So I really like Osai. And there was a period of time where I think I'd rather have Phillips, although now I don't think the Titans, with the signings we've made, like signing Bud Dupree, we're probably not going to go edge rusher in the first round. Before free agency, Phillips and Osai were like my 2 guys I wanted at that spot. And I think Osai would be a really, really good fit for the Buccaneers, because you've got Shaq Barrett, who's very much more of a speed rusher. Pierre-Paul, who's typically in his career been a little more finesse than power. Osai would give them a nice kind of complementary, like, power kind of guy. That's why I like the idea of him next to Harold Landry. Harold Landry's a speed guy. Osai's more power. I like having some balance there. It's actually one of the reasons I like the Bud Dupree signing. Like, Bud Dupree's a very much speed to power kind of rusher. He's going to get under your pads. He's going to and use his quickness off the ball and his power getting under those pads to kind of dislodge tackles and then get through and then get past. So, but Osai's my number 4. My number 5 guy is, which there's some people who have. I have Zaven Collins with my off-ball guys. There's some people who are looking at Micah Parsons now as like a potential edge guy. I still have him in my off-ball because he has such great all-around potential. Zaven Collins, same way. He's so all-around that, like I mentioned, like he could definitely be a 3-4 outside linebacker, 4-3, but he's got really good coverage skills, and I don't know. Zaven Collins could fit anywhere. Like he could also be. You could put him with your edge defenders. I just have my off-ball guys because I'd love to see him as a 4-3 strong side guy. I think he could be dominant there. Same with Micah Parsons. But my number 5 is Azeez Ojulari out of Georgia. He might be the best pure speed rusher in the draft in terms of first step quickness and his like agility, like his flexibility. His speed rush is just elite. He's not as well rounded as some of these other guys, but when your first trick is as effective as his, you don't need a whole lot of counters. He also has some, underneath coverage skills, flat coverage skills that make him like a really good fit in a 3-4, which is what he played in college with Georgia. So he would be my number 5. Sorry. I just got a. Not that. Sorry, I'm pulling up once again my rankings. Like I said, I think it was Tuesday or maybe it was Monday. I try to memorize all my stuff so I'm not having to read, but it is a lot of information for me to remember. So I'm pulling up my list with some notes, like some small notes, so I can or have all my stuff together. Do. Okay, down to my spot here. So yeah, so my number 6 pass rusher, edge defender in this year's draft. Oh, sorry. Actually, I think I might. You know what? I'm gonna flip those two guys. Yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do. I think that would be the wise move. So, my number 6 guy after Ojulari. And I might drop him further, actually. I'm going to mention this guy because I had him higher because he just had an incredible pro day. But Jason Owe is a really athletic guy out of Penn State. But he had no sacks last year, and he doesn't have a whole lot of sack production. Now, he does get pressure, and he does make plays in the backfield. And the guy ran like a 4.3 4.40, and he's like 6'5", 240 something, I think. He has incredible tools, as good a tools as anyone, if not the best tools of any pass rusher in this draft, especially in terms of quickness. But production. I moved him up because of the measurables, but there's something that's just saying if you got 0 sacks, that should be a red flag. So I think he's an incredible project player. He is going to go in the second round. But I don't know if I would take him over some of these other guys. So my number 6 player, I'm going to go with Joe Tryon of Washington, which is a little higher than some other people have him. I think he's his 9th outside linebacker right now, which I think he could play 4th or 4-3 end in certain schemes. But I really like Tryon's tape from Washington. He sat out this last season. But he's quick. He has good bend. I also just like Washington. They coach up. It's like their defenses have been coached up real well in the last, really decade, but I want to focus on like the last 5-6 years. They've been putting out really quality prospects at every level of the defense. And Tryon has really good tools. I don't think he's as good as his teammate, who's an interior rusher, Levi. I'm gonna go to my other that list. Levi Onwuzurike out of Washington, but Tryon's really good. Tryon's a really good pass rusher out of Washington. Maybe you might want like your guys a little stronger than Tryon, but I'm a fan of his tape, so which then puts me at number 7 at the edge. I'm gonna go with, and this one probably is a little higher than he's definitely. I don't think he'll go ahead of some of these other guys I haven't ranked ahead of, but Ellerson Smith. I believe it's Ellerson. Yep, I got it right. I'm like, no, I think it's a Landon. No, it's Ellerson. Ellerson Smith out of Northern Iowa. This guy had a great pro day. His explosion numbers were off the charts. This guy jumped like a 40-something inch vertical. And I think it was like an 11-foot one or maybe it was a close to 11-foot broad jump. And he's thickly, strongly built. He ran like a 4.7 40, 4.7 4.40, somewhere in there. A guy that a lot of people have ranked higher than him, Ronnie Perkins. I know that Daniel Jeremiah is super high on Ronnie Perkins out of Oklahoma. He's as fast as Perkins, but he's bigger, stronger, and more explosive. Perkins is actually about to come up on my list, but I like Ellerson Smith out of Northern Iowa. He did play a lower level of competition, but he has the physical tools, physical traits to be a force off the edge. I love his lower body explosion that we got from the vertical and broad jump numbers, and he ran a really good 3-cone too. I think he ran like a 6.95 3-cone, which is a really good indicator of pass rushing success at the NFL level. He has really good bend and agility at his size and strength. So I'm a big fan of him. I think he's a small school guy that's really going to, or that has a chance to really pop at the next level. At number 8, I'm going to put, at number 8's where I'm going to go with Ronnie Perkins. Perkins was one of the few guys that actually was able to get the better of Tevin Jenkins on occasion. And like I said, Tevin Jenkins is really good. A guy that I already really liked, but really he's rising up my board. Perkins, for his size, I wish he was a little faster than a 4.7 4.40 that he ran in his pro day. But he's got great technique. He's got a really quick first step, really good bend. Maybe his top speed's not elite, but his burst off the line is really, really good. And he's a really smart player. Has counter moves. And he was a leader on the Oklahoma Sooners defense from like day one. Kenneth Murray, who was drafted last year, has raved about Perkins and talked about how Perkins as a freshman was, a vocal like presence on the team that people respected. And that matters to me. I think that's usually a sign of success, of a guy he's not going to fail. He might not become like a star, but he's going to be worth the draft pick. I think he's solidly going to be a second. I think Ronnie Perkins is a solid second round pick. And I think there's a lot of the edge guys who would be solid choices in the second round. I actually think this is in terms of just overall talent, this is a really deep draft class. I think there's more first round level talent than there are first round picks this year. I think there is more. I think there are guys. There are a bunch of guys who are not in my top 50 this year who would have been in my top 50 like probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago, which last year's draft was a great draft too, but it was particularly like really good at the wide receiver position. I actually think this draft is probably deeper overall than last year. So yeah. So Perkins is my number 8. My number 9, I'm going to go with Jason Owe here, because I just like Owe. Should I say I like him? I love Owe's tools. Like Owe, you can't. I mean, if you built a guy like an athlete in a lab to play the edge rushing position, you might come out with Owe. He'd be like one of your 3 favorite prototypes that you came up with. Your others would be like Myles Garrett and maybe. Well, I would say Owe's like. I'll tell you who Owe reminds me of in terms of his like physical profile. He's like Javon Curse, but you supercharge Javon Curse. Or maybe a more recent example, he's kind of like a supercharged Danielle Hunter. Because there were a lot of people who were like kind of questioned like Danielle Hunter's production at LSU, which is why he didn't go until it was like the end of the second round. I don't think he fell all the way to the third. I want to say it was like midway or the end of the second round, like Hunter went. But when you looked at his measurables, it's like, gosh, this dude looks like this guy seems like he was made in a lab specifically for this. And Hunter has been a top level player at the edge rush position for the Vikings. So, and there's part of me that wants to put Owe higher, but I tend to go with production and technique a little bit over tools. If you have both of those, I'm down. But if you've got kind of one, or if you've got elite tools, but you don't have everything else, like, I'm gonna drop you. Now, that doesn't mean Owe doesn't have some production. He has some really good tape. He does get pressure. Um, he can just blow up run plays with his quickness. But it's still a red flag to me that you had 0 sacks last year. With that, especially with those tools. Although you could say that teams were extremely wary of him. So, for sure, Owe is my number 9. And my number 10, I'm seeing this guy a lot lower on a lot of other people's lists. Kuiper doesn't have him in his top 10 defensive ends or outside linebackers, although he's probably an end for most people. And I'm a little high on him because I know exactly where he would fit well and exactly whose profile he would just be a perfect scheme fit for, and it's the Ravens. And his name is Cam Sample out of Tulane. So Sample is a big, strong edge defender. He is a power defender. He has good get off, but like this guy does a really great job of in the run game just using his leverage and power to like control blocks and get off. He just bulldozes and he can at his level because he was playing a lower level of competition at Tulane. Bulldozing offensive tackles. I just really like him, and he plays just like the Ravens like their edge guys. Like they drafted. Well, he's like a better version of Jalen Ferguson out of Louisiana Tech, in my opinion. Yes, Ferguson had crazy production at Louisiana Tech, but I actually think Sample is a better prospect than Ferguson. But they're very similar. He reminds me, and he's a better pass rusher than Courtney Upshaw was coming out of Alabama. And Upshaw was a, pretty highly rated prospect. Great in the run game, kind of a bulldozing player. Eventually ended up like towards the end of his career, he was doing a lot of he was playing like nickel defensive tackle, and some 5 technique. He just kept getting bigger, like thicker. Although he was only I think Upshaw was only like 6'1". But I really like Sample. Some other guys to note, because there's going to be people who are like, well, what about Carlos Boogie Basham of Wake Forest? I like Basham. He's got great technique, but he lacks a little explosion to me, and and Epinesa didn't do too well. But Basham's not like slower than 5-second 40 like Epinesa. That was a really big blow because I was a huge fan of Epinesa as a prospect, and I saw that. I'm like, that makes me question. I think Basham will be super effective as like the strong side end in a 4-3, who's a little more power oriented, a little more run defense oriented, who then kicks inside, kind of like a Michael Bennett. I think he could play a lot like a Michael Bennett did for Seattle. I think that's Basham's role. Because I don't think he has because unlike a guy like Sample, I think Sample has the lateral agility to play like 3-4 outside linebacker. Basham doesn't. And he's a bigger dude too. He's a big defensive end. But I don't necessarily think he's like a 5 technique in a 3-4 type defensive end. I really think he's like that strong side. He plays he's more like a Michael Bennett. You play him on the edge on kind of early downs in like more of a base type defense or whatever, and you move on in pass rushing situations. You move him in to like that 3 technique role, and you let him feast on guards. I think that's Basham, and he's a borderline top 10 guy, but it's because I think he's better as an interior rusher that I don't have in my top 10 edge guys. So a couple other names. You've got Quincy Roche out of Miami, who I think is good value. He's talented, but I think a lot of his production is because he was on talented Miami defenses and he got to play across from Jalen Phillips. You know, a guy I'm higher on than him, like another guy, Chris Rumpf out of Duke. I really like him. I think he could go late round 2, but I think if you can get Chris Rumpf the second in round 3, really good value out of that pick. Big fan. Oh, I am a big fan of Rumpf. He just doesn't have necessarily like elite traits, or he doesn't have some of the elite explosion traits of like an Owe or an Ojolari or an Osai. Personally, for me. And you know what? I'll give you one more guy. Actually, I'll give you 2 more guys. Past my top 10. Peyton Turner and Patrick Jones II out of Peyton Turner out of Houston. He was actually pretty freaking productive at Houston. I think he's probably solidly kind of like a 3rd round guy. Same with Patrick Jones. Patrick Jones, I think Jones got hurt a little bit by not playing the season, and then he was kind of up and down at the Senior Bowl. But I like Jones. Just fine. And this should tell everybody. A lot of people don't have like this as an elite edge class. They don't. At the top, this is a deep, deep, deep edge class. There are a lot of guys who could very easily hit. Obviously, some of these guys aren't going to work out for different reasons, because the draft is about projection and projecting future development. So some of these guys are going to fail. And in terms of bust potential, I see like Jason Owe being like one of those guys with just extreme bust potential. I think Owe is either going to be an outstanding player, or he's going to be out of the league by the end of his rookie deal, kind of thing. Although with his physical talents, that probably won't be true. Someone will probably take a chance on him for several years after that, but guys. And wow, I actually ended up taking up pretty much exactly 2 hours. So the show. So I thank everybody for tuning in once again. If you like the show, please hit the like button. If you want more Blind Eye Live, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell next to the subscribe button. Click all, because if you want to see more, you want to be notified that more is coming, because YouTube isn't just going to do that for you. And please leave a comment. Once this goes up, please leave a comment. I'll read the comments and try and learn from whatever y'all want me to, or learn from whatever y'all aren't liking. Try and change some things. Any advice and criticism would be totally appropriate. And I would like to have it, even if maybe some of it is not exactly what I want to hear. So anyway, appreciate y'all for giving me a chance. another thing, please share with your friends, like, because to me that's the biggest compliment is someone's willing to share it with their friends, not just randomly post on social media. Although I'd be totally cool with that too. Um, and I have some social, or I need to create some social medias. I'm working on that because I would like to have logos done before I created like official social media stuff. So, with that being said, I'm working on improving the stream and everything. So this is going to get better and better with time, and I appreciate y'all giving me a chance. So, y'all have a blessed day. I'm gonna go down a bottle of water and sit out and enjoy the rest of this really, really pretty Southeast Texas afternoon.